Those of us who make a success of it, success of this at this level of consciousness, that is, say, in terms of getting worldly success, name, fame, wealth, and all that, they get so satisfied and involved in it that they have no time to go any deeper. And those who are not able to get this type of success, they find it so attractive that they keep pursuing it. So Lord Buddha said, did anyone say that if I am enlightened before I die, then I'll be able to die in peace? Said, oh, not everybody said. So if people don't want enlightenment, why should I give that message? It's not that to the Rishi who has experienced the ultimate reality, the reality as we see it does not exist. To him also it exists. At least that is the way Sri Aurobindo looks at Vedanta. That to him also that is real, it is a partial reality, it is an evanescent reality, it is a perishable reality, but that reality does not disappear even to the Rishi. The only thing is that he can see within that reality, beyond that reality, above that reality, a deeper layer of reality. In our series based on the Mother's The Great Adventure, today we shall take up the passage on page 58. This passage is entitled, The Only Truly Effective Attitude. In this passage the Mother says, everyone can gauge from the resistance he meets in his own being the tremendous resistance with which the world opposes the work of the grace. And it is only when one understands that all external things, all mental constructions, all material efforts are vain, futile, if they are not entirely consecrated to this light and force from above, to this truth which is trying to express itself, that one is ready to make decisive progress. So, the only truly effective attitude is a perfect, total, fervent giving of our being to that which is above us and which alone has the power to change everything. When you open to the Spirit within you, it brings you a first foretaste of that higher life which alone is worth living. Then comes the will to rise to that, the hope of reaching it, the certitude that this is possible, and finally the strength to make the necessary effort and the resolution to go to the very end. First, one must wake up, then one can conquer. I'll go over this passage slowly. Everyone can gauge from the resistance he meets in his own being the tremendous resistance with which the world opposes the work of the grace. It's very easy for us to understand things which are based on our own experience. Something which is based on our own experience, we internalize and we can identify with it, and therefore not only we understand it very well, we also have a tendency to extrapolate it to everybody else. That if this is what is happening to me or this is how I feel, probably everybody is feeling the same. So this is what the Mother is saying here, that each one of us feels a great deal of resistance in his own being, and therefore it is easy for us to understand how much resistance the world as a whole offers to the work of the divine. So the Mother is talking of the resistance to the work of the divine grace. Now this is something which we can easily identify with, and therefore it's easy to understand that the world as a whole is doing it. And if the world as a whole is doing it, how difficult is the goal that Sri Aurobindo and the Mother set as spiritual masters, that is the ascent of consciousness of the planet as a whole taking a new leap towards a new race, a race with a new level of consciousness which is qualitatively different and higher as compared to the level of consciousness today. So there is a great deal of resistance to that. Why is that resistance there? That resistance is there because of the way we are constituted. In the spiritual evolution, starting with the dead matter, into which the divine chose to limit itself long, long ago, on this planet, the evolution has taken a course where that matter has been gradually expressing a bit more of its consciousness gradually. And first, as a result of that, came creatures which had the spark of life, the primitive creatures, and then came creatures with that supreme consciousness expressed a little more, the plants, then the animals with a mind, and the latest product of that evolution, of that gradual unfolding of the supreme consciousness in manifestation, is the human being. But even in the human being, the supreme consciousness is expressed to only such a small degree that most of us live at what Sri Aurobindo and the mother call the vital mental level. Vital mental level, or the physical vital mental level, which means at the level of the body, the vital, that is the emotions, the passions, the desires, and the mental, that is the intellect, which works on the basis of reason, calculation, comparison, and so on. So that is the level at which we live most of our life. That is the consciousness around which our life is normally organized. And that, in fact, is quite far removed from the supreme consciousness. And because this level of being, that is the vital mental level, is an ignorant consciousness, but at the same time is not an uninteresting consciousness, we get highly involved in it. It's a highly involving consciousness. It engages us very actively. It can be very entertaining. It can be very interesting. Those of us who make a success of it, success of this at this level of consciousness, that is, say, in terms of getting worldly success, name, fame, wealth, and all that, they get so satisfied and involved in it that they have no time to go any deeper. And those who are not able to get this type of success, they find it so attractive that they keep pursuing it. And the result is that neither those who are deprived of the interesting and more entertaining, one might even say trapping aspects of the material level of consciousness, those who are deprived of it, they spend their life pursuing it, and those who are able to get it, they spend their life trying to enjoy it. And the result is that we are not really drawn towards anything. So it's a question of what really at this level of consciousness we find interesting, worth spending our life on. And that is what keeps us away from the ascent of consciousness which the mother is talking about, and therefore we offer a great deal of resistance to it. In fact, even when we come to know about it, we tend to resist it. When we get some sort of a glimpse of it, we have a tendency to resist it. There's a story about once a disciple of Lord Buddha asking him, why don't you share your message of enlightenment, your route to enlightenment with everybody else, your formula for enlightenment? So he told this disciple, okay, I'll do it, but first you do one thing. You visit the households around and go and ask in each family, what is it that the people living there would want to happen before they die, so that they can die in peace? Are there some pending tasks still remaining in their life, after which they feel that they'll be able to die in peace? You go and ask them what those things are. So he went to a large number of people and then came back and told Lord Buddha, yes, I have gone to many people. Some people said that I'll be very able to die in peace if my daughter gets married before I die. Somebody said, I'll be very happy if I'm able to build a house before I die. Some people said, I'll be very happy if my child gets a job, then I'll be happy to die. Somebody said, when this litigation, this court case that I'm involved in, when that is finally resolved in my favor, then I can die in peace. So he came with all types of things, that these are the types of things people think that if they happen before they die, they'll be able to die in peace. So Lord Buddha said, did anyone say that if I am enlightened before I die, then I'll be able to die in peace? He said, oh, not everybody said. So if people don't want enlightenment, why should I give that message? So that was the answer. Which means that we live primarily at the vital mental level, and we see our problems, our aspirations, our desires, what we want to really achieve in life at that level. That is the level at which we live most of the time. And that is why it is so difficult to experience that higher level of pleasure which can come from living at a deeper level, at the level of our soul. Although that is our most fundamental reality, that is our imperishable reality, that in fact is our true identity. Our true identity is not the name and the form and all that we have in this life. Our true identity is the divine itself, the soul, and the rest is only a surface appearance, the surface appearance that has been given to us to serve as an instrument for action in the outer world. The instruments that we have been given for action, so that we can use these instruments for evolving spiritually. The instruments that have been given to this journey, so that on its journey it can rise to a higher level in its expression. Of course, the soul is perfect in itself, but then it has a certain level of expression. Just as the electricity is the same, but it can have a wide variety of expressions. When it passes through this fan, it gives air, and when it passes through a fluorescent lamp or a tube, then it gives light. So the same electricity can give different types of effects depending upon what type of instrument it is passing through. So the soul is potentially divine, but the types of manifestation it has, the type of actions it will engage in, will depend upon the type of instrument through which it is passing. Now, this instrument has been given to us so that we can perfect this instrument, so that it starts working more and more in light of the divine within, in light of the soul. So, these instruments, the body, mind and the intellect, or the physical, vital and mental, are imperfect. By and large, they are quite satisfied with living at a superficial level of consciousness, at the vital mental level, but it's not that they are imperfectible. They may be imperfect, but they are not imperfectible, which means they are capable of becoming perfect. And that is what yoga is all about. But then we really don't seem very interested in taking these instruments towards that perfection, where these instruments will be able to work in light of the divine. So that is the resistance which the mother is talking about. And since that type of resistance is not at all unfamiliar to any of us, we feel that we can understand how it happens and why it happens, because we have all experienced it, and by and large most of us continue to experience it in spite of coming to the satsang, speaking in the satsang, living in an ashram. In spite of all these things, we continue to experience this type of limitation that we have at the physical, vital, mental level. That it's easy to identify that if I can experience this resistance, I feel so much of this resistance, the world as a whole would also be possibly feeling it. So, because whatever we feel in our personal life, it's easy for us to extrapolate to the rest of the world and imagine and understand that yes, this must be happening to everybody else. So this is what the mother is saying here. And then she goes on to talk about the type of attitude that can help in overcoming this resistance. And it's only when one understands that all external things, all mental constructions, all material efforts are vain, futile, if they are not entirely consecrated to this light and force from above, to this truth which is trying to express itself, that one is ready to make decisive progress. So the only true effective attitude is a perfect, total, fervent giving of our being to that which is above us and which alone has the power to change everything. In fact, it is all a question of attitude. Yoga is all about attitude, because when it comes to the reality is the same to everyone. It's how we see it. It's not that to the rishi who has experienced the ultimate reality, the reality as we see it does not exist. To him also it exists. At least that is the way Sri Aurobindo looks at Vedanta. That to him also that is real, it is a partial reality, it is an evanescent reality, it is a perishable reality, but that reality does not disappear even to the rishi. The only thing is that he can see within that reality, beyond that reality, above that reality, a deeper layer of reality. And that is the divine. So he can see the divine in everything in which we do not see it, but he also sees what we see. So that does not disappear. So it's a question of attitude, how we are able to see what we see. For example, suppose we look at the sunrise. And we just say, oh, what a beautiful sunrise. Now this is at an emotional level. It's a vital, at a vital level we appreciate the beauty of the sunrise. At the mental level, what do we say? A dispassionate mental perception of the sunrise. I can see in the sky an orange colored shining disk about 2 feet in diameter, and so on. That also is a description of the same sunrise, with its brightness radiating all around it and gradually becoming less and less in intensity the farther away we move from that disk. That is the type of description a scientist might give. But then how does the Rishi see it? The Rishi suddenly sees in it a brilliant expression of the cosmic expression of the divine, the cosmos. It looks at it as a part of the cosmos. And then if the Rishi gets into a poetic mode, then he does not just describe it like a poet, a beautiful sunrise and so on, the way a poet might describe, an ordinary poet at the mental level might describe it. The poet comes up with a mantra like Hiranmayena patrena satyasyapi hitam mukham tattvam pushanna pavrinu satya dharmaya drishtaye. Hiranmayena patrena, like a golden lid. What is that golden lid doing? It is covering the truth. Hiranmayena patrena satyasyapi hitam mukham. So, it is covering the mukh, the face of truth. A golden lid is covering the face of truth. It can easily cover the face of truth because it's very dazzling. Dazzling can mean it's very attractive. It can also mean that it does not allow us to see beyond it because of the dazzling effect it creates. It incapacitates the eyes through its dazzling effects. So, that is the type of golden lid that covers the truth. Hiranmayena patrena satyasyapi hitam mukham tattvam pushanna pavrinu. And then he makes that prayer, "Oh Lord, remove that lid, open that door. Open that door that is shielding the truth from me, that doesn't let me see the truth. Tattvam pushanna pavrinu satya dharmaya drishtaye," so that I can see the truth, so that I can get a glimpse of the ultimate reality. So, it all depends upon. So, it means that the same sun can acquire such a wide variety of connotations. It can acquire such a different way. So, this becomes mantric poetry. This becomes a mantra in one of the Upanishads. The same sun, and you can see, this is not ordinary mental level poetry, this becomes over mind poetry, like Savitri. So it's all a question of attitude. So the attitude to what we see determines what we see. जैसे जब दृष्टि बदल जाती है तो सृष्टि बदल जाती है, जब नज़र बदल जाती है तो नज़रिया बदल जाता है. So depending upon the attitude, we have a tendency to see what we want to see. And therefore, it's all a question of yoga is basically about attitude to what we see, attitude to people, attitude to events and circumstances in life. So what is the type of attitude the mother is inculcating in this paragraph? That one should understand that all external things, all mental constructions, all material efforts are vain, futile, if they are not entirely consecrated to this light and force from above, to this truth which is trying to express itself, that one is ready to make decisive progress. So, it's not that all external things, that is things that we see and the mental constructions and mental effort is actually vain and futile, because she's qualifying it, that it is vain and futile unless it is consecrated to this light and force. It means unless it is made sacred. Consecrate means made sacred. It is made sacred by this light and force from above. That is, by the light and force of the divine. To this truth which is trying to express itself. To this truth which resides in the divine. The truth, the light, the force, all these are different expressions of the divine. When, written here in capitals, capital L in the light and capital F, force with a capital F and truth with a capital T. So, all material efforts are vain, futile, if they are not entirely consecrated to this light and force from above, to this truth which is trying to express itself, that one is ready to make decisive progress. So, it's only when one is able to see the worldly objects, thoughts, mental constructions, worldly effort, one is able to see it in light of the divine, that is as an expression of the divine light and force, and thereby make these things sacred, that one is able to make progress on the path of yoga. Progress on the path of yoga means progress on the path that takes us towards a perception of that which we generally don't see. Perception of that to which we normally offer a great deal of resistance, which the mother was talking about. So it takes us towards the perception of that. That we can perceive only if we see in these ordinary things, that is worldly things and objects and thoughts and effort, we start seeing in it the divine, and we start seeing in it the light and force of the divine. So the only truly effective attitude is a perfect, total, fervent giving of our being to that which is above us and which alone has the power to change everything. So the only way we can make this type of progress and perceive that to which we offer normally so much resistance is a complete giving of our being to that which is above us and which alone has the power to change everything. Only the divine can change us, because the way we are normally constituted, of course that is also an expression of the divine, but then we have been constituted in such a way that we have a resistance to expressing the divine more than we already do. We are quite happy to live at the physical, vital, mental level. To bring about that conversion is difficult because we offer so much resistance. For that we have to change our attitude, and to be able to change that attitude, because of the great resistance, we need to not only change our attitude but also open up to the divine so that its grace can work on us. Because it's only that power which can change everything, can change us also. It can bring about that alchemy. Alchemists were trying to change everything into gold. They were trying to get gold from baser metals. That's how the science of chemistry began. So the greatest alchemist is the divine, who can change everything. That is what the mother is talking about, that only that power has the power to change everything, and therefore the only true attitude is to give all of our being. What does giving all of our being means? Giving all of our being first and foremost means giving of our time and talent. And using this instrument that we have been given, the instrument that is the body-mind complex, for serving the divine. What is serving the divine? That can take any shape. The shape that will take depend upon the type of unique talents, gifts and circumstances that we have been given. Now one might say that, and that is something that we do for a living. How does that become divine work? We use our abilities under the circumstances we are to do some work to make a living. Everybody is not at your stage with grey hair who can say that, I can live on what I did in the past. So young people have to make a living out of it. Now how can one do that? Now the way one can do it is that one keeps the two things apart. The making of the living is incidental. That is not the primary reason for which we are working. So that is a necessity to keep the body and soul together. But that is incidental, and when we do that, then we don't say this much work for this much money. We are not trying to relate the two. This much money because this job brings me this much money and it is enough for me to survive. This much work because that is the work that I am capable of doing and I am offering it to the divine. So the two are apart, and this is the type of work I can do best. This is the best that I can do, and I will do my best so that this work becomes fit as an offering to the divine. So the two things remain separate. So the only true attitude is a perfect, total and fervent giving of our being to that which is above us and which alone has the power to change everything. Of course, first and foremost in everyday life is giving of our time, talent, work, actions to the divine. But then the yoga is in fact about everything about giving. Not just about giving our work or giving objects or giving love and affection. It is also about giving up, that is renouncing internally things which we may be using, which we may be having, so that we are not attached to them, we are not dependent upon them for our happiness. So that is giving up. It is also about giving in. Giving in is surrender. Surrender to the divine will. Surrender of the personal will to the divine will. Subordinating individual will to the divine will. So, yoga is all about giving. Giving away, giving up, giving in. Giving all of ourselves. That is what yoga is about. And with that attitude, we place ourselves in the hands of the divine, who alone has the power to change everything. Then the mother goes on to say, when you open to the spirit within you, it brings you a first foretaste of that higher life which alone is worth living. Then comes the will to rise to that, the hope of reaching it, the certitude that this is possible, and finally the strength to make the necessary effort and the resolution to go to the very end. First one must wake up, then one can conquer. Now here the mother is giving a lot of encouragement, hope. What she is trying to say is that the most difficult part is to make the beginning. Because we have an inbuilt resistance. We have a congenital resistance to seeing the divine, to aspiring for the divine. We tend to live at the physical, vital, mental level. So the most important thing is to break that initial resistance. Once that initial resistance has been broken, after that there's a whole chain that will take us through. So that is that chain that the mother is trying to build up. So she says, as in the last sentence, first one must wake up, then one must conquer. So the waking up, the initial awakening, is the most difficult thing. That is the primary thing. So once that initial awakening has taken place, that is our consciousness has been awakened. As if normally we are in a state of sleep. We may be normally, in the normal language, we may be awake, and yet in a spiritual sense we can be asleep. In the sense that we are ignorant of the true dimensions of the total reality, and therefore to much of the reality, in fact, we are asleep. So in that sense we are asleep, and what we need is an awakening. Once that awakening has taken place, which means we have become aware of something beyond the obvious, we have become aware of something beyond what is easily visible, then the next step would be an aspiration. And how would that aspiration come? As a result of the foretaste of that higher life. Which means we'll get some glimpse of it, we'll get some sort of an introduction to it, like the trailer of a movie. That's what we will get. And then that will create that intense desire that, yes, this is worth pursuing. So that initial foretaste is what is important. Because a lot of resistance is because of not realizing the nature of joy and bliss and happiness that resides on this path. As Sri Aurobindo has said, in the essays on the Gita, that when we say that spiritual life is very difficult, we are forgetting that worldly life is also very difficult. A life which is guided primarily by passions and desires is also an extremely difficult life. In fact, it is more difficult than the spiritual life. But then why are we still satisfied with it? Why do we still stick to it? Because we are familiar with it. So it is the fear of the unknown, the fear of the unfamiliar that keeps us away from plunging into spirituality. It is that fear that prevents us from changing our path and trying to pursue the divine within our worldly life. It is that which prevents us. We want to live worldly life like the ordinary worldly life because that is the only level with which we are familiar. Because we are afraid whether we will be able to breathe in that rarer atmosphere of spiritual life. A very beautiful analogy, rarer atmosphere. What is a rarer atmosphere? An atmosphere where the air is less dense. We are all very happy living at sea level because the oxygen is at a nice pressure. We can breathe very easily. When we go to a high altitude, say suppose we go to 12,000 feet or 15,000 feet, till 7,000 feet or so, we hardly feel any difference. But when we go beyond that, the air becomes less dense. The mountains are beautiful. The Everest is beautiful. But then one can't breathe there. One has to carry oxygen. But much before we reach even the Everest, by the time one is at 12,000 feet, one is panting. Why? Because the atmosphere is very rare. It's a rarer atmosphere, although the mountains are beautiful. So we are afraid of breathing that in that rarer atmosphere of spiritual life, because we are very accustomed to the ordinary sea level, the level at which we live in our worldly life. So we are so accustomed to it that we have a fear of the unknown. We have the fear of that unknown, rarer atmosphere which we will experience at that higher altitude. But once we are shown some pictures of the Everest and we find that it can be beautiful, then we can develop an intense desire to climb the Everest in spite of all difficulties, going to the mountains. We can acquire that. So this is that foretaste. The foretaste is being shown those photographs. So once we are awakened, then we get that glimpse. We get a glimpse of that beauty that and bliss that resides at that level. So once we have got that foretaste, then what follows is the will to rise to that. So once we have got the foretaste, then we develop a strong will that yes, I want to go there. The hope of reaching it. Then we also feel that yes, if I try, I will be able to reach it. And then follows the certitude that this is possible. Then we become very certain that yes, it will happen. Why? Because divine grace comes in, and that makes us feel more and more certain that yes, not only I want to do it, I will do it, and it will happen. And finally, what we get from the divine is the strength to make the necessary effort and the resolution to go to the very end. So all the rest follows that initial foretaste, that initial glimpse that we get. The rest follows. Of course, one can say that that initial glimpse, that little awakening in the beginning, is also a part of divine grace. Therefore, how much is grace and how much is effort, that remains a moot point. Just as putting in the effort later on is grace, the initial awakening is also grace. And although effort will earn still more grace, but the beginning also is in a way with divine grace, and therefore in a way the divine is playing a role in our life throughout, and those of us who are able to break this resistance are experiencing, you can say, an excess of divine grace, which is making it possible to get that awakening, to get that foretaste. And why does that happen? Why that partiality? Why some get in large numbers continue to remain resistant? Well, in terms of Vedanta, that is possibly because of the homework done in previous lives. So the more the homework that has been done already, the greater the chance that the awakening will come in this life. So there's no partiality there. It's just a question of how much of the journey an individual soul has already covered. So beyond that, then we go in this life. Okay, I can close this with a few lines from Savitri, which are also about what we started with, and that is in the resistance that human nature offers to this awakening, to this view of the world that takes us beyond the physical, vital, mental level. And this is in Book 3, Canto 3, right at the beginning. Ashwapati has already been through all the layers of reality, all the different worlds. But then he discovers that there is a lot of resistance that humanity offers. And in spite of all the enlightenment that he has already achieved, he finds that somewhere in some corner, even in him, that little bit of that ignorance which offers resistance, that still is persisting. That's what he's talking about. In the texture of our bound humanity, he felt the stark resistance, huge and dumb, of our inconscient and unseeing base, the stubborn, mute rejection in life's depths, the ignorant no in the origin of things. So in the normal texture that our humanity has, that type of feel it has, Ashwapati felt, the stark resistance, huge and dumb. It means this is an ignorant resistance based on ignorance, on dumbness, of our inconscient and unseeing base. So it's a blind and dumb consciousness that offers the resistance. But that, unfortunately, is our base. Our base is the body-mind complex. That is our base. And that base is highly ignorant, and that is why it offers this resistance. A veiled collaboration with the night, even in himself, survived and hid from his view. Still something in his earthly being kept its kinship with the inconscient whence it came. So he found it in humanity in general, but then when he looked within himself, he found that it had not disappeared completely even from him. As he says, a veiled collaboration with the night. There seemed to be sort of a individual seems to be in some sort of a collaboration with the night. Night, signifies darkness. Darkness signifies ignorance. So there's some sort of a collaboration with that ignorance, as if we are interested in perpetuating that ignorance, maintaining that ignorance. So there's a sort of a collaboration with the ignorance. A veiled collaboration with the night, even in himself survived and hid from his view. So this collaboration with ignorance survived even in himself. And what did it do? It hid from his view. What did it hide from his view? Still something in his being kept its kinship with the inconscient whence it came. So hid from his view something which was vital. And why did that happen? Because something in his earthly being kept its kinship with the inconscient whence it came. So something in his earthly life, in his earthly being, in his earthly existence, kept its kinship, kept its relationship, kept its intimacy, relationship with the inconscient whence it came, with the inconscient from which it had come. Now, you might say that we did not come from the inconscient, we came from the Supreme Consciousness. That's true. But then in the course of evolution, the divine underwent an involution, a gross, tremendous involution and self-limitation, and became dead inconscient matter. And it is from that inconscient matter in the course of evolution that we came. So in one sense, if we just ignore that very initial step of creation where the Supreme Consciousness underwent that involution, then our origin in fact can be traced to that inconscient matter. So because of that origin in that inconscient matter, that relationship with it, kinship with it, persists and keeps us from a view of the ultimate reality. A shadowy unity with a vanished past, treasured in an old frame, was lurking there, secret, unnoted by the illumined mind, and in subconscious whispers and in dream, still murmured at the mind's and spirit's choice. So, here once again we find that same resistance described. A shadowy unity with a vanished past, treasured in an old world frame, was lurking there. So some sort of a unity, some sort of a relationship with a vanished past, with a past which is now disappeared, that is gone, that the past which was inconscient and was primarily at the physical, vital, mental level, that now is a past that seems to have gone in human beings, but at the same time some sort of a unity with it persists. And how is it kept? It is treasured in an old world frame and continues to lurk somewhere in our being, continues to hide, continues to work secretly in our being. And therefore the next one, secret. No, the secret applies to what is lurking there secretly, and then unnoted by the illumined mind, which means even the illumined mind of the seer, of the rishi, who Ashwapati has reached the level of the illumined mind, from it that inconscient unity with the inconscient conscience remains secret, means it is able to hide itself even from the illumined mind. Instead of getting illuminated by the illumined mind, it remains hidden from it. Secret, unnoted by the illumined mind, and in subconscious whispers and in dream, still murmured at the mind's and spirit's choice. So it remains hidden from the illumined mind, and instead, in dreams, the subconscious starts whispering. What does it whisper? It whispers those same vital and mental desires and thoughts which the illumined mind has tried to remove. So the illumined mind tries to banish those, but they have such a tendency to persist that they are able to remain secret even from the illumined mind, keep hiding in a corner, and then in the dreams they come up from the subconscious level. Its treacherous elements spread like slippery grains. So then what happens when they come out in those whispers? They spread on the floor like slippery grains. If sometimes a sack, bori, full of rice or wheat is suddenly torn and the grain spills on the floor and you try to walk over it, what happens? We slip. So the grains can be very slippery. Its treacherous elements spread like slippery grains, hoping the incoming truth might stumble and fall. That is, so that level which does not want us to perceive the ultimate reality, it has some sort of as if a vested interest in maintaining the ignorance. From the subconscious level, those things spill out like slippery grains, hoping that the truth, when it arrives, will not be able to reach us because it will stumble and fall. It will slip on those grains which have come out from the subconscious. Beautiful analogy. Its treacherous elements, its means the subconscious whispers and all that. So in the secret that is treasured in the old world frame. Its treacherous elements spread like slippery grains, hoping the incoming truth might stumble and fall. And old ideal voices wandering mourned and pleaded for a heavenly leniency to the gracious imperfections of our earth and the sweet weaknesses of our mortal state. And how do these remains, these vestiges of the past, how do they express themselves? They express themselves in the form of old ideal voices. That is, they put on an appearance of an ideal. At the mental level, we can have so many ideals which are still far removed from the ultimate truth. So they acquire the voices of that old ideals, and then they plead for a heavenly leniency to the gracious imperfections of our earth. They plead with the divine that, oh, you are so merciful, you are so lenient, you can be so kind to us. They plead for that leniency, that let this imperfection continue. Somehow grant us the pleasures of these imperfections. Why pleasures? Because we've seen that it has a lot of attraction. And that's why Sri Aurobindo says, we plead for a heavenly leniency to the gracious imperfections of our earth and the sweet weaknesses of our mortal state. The weaknesses of our mortal state have a sort of a sweetness about them. And it is because of that sweetness, even after reaching the level of the illumined mind, they come out somewhere at the subconscious level in our dreams, and we start pleading, let these also continue. Along with the truth that we have seen, let this also continue. We don't want to give it up completely. This now he willed to discover and exile, the element in him betraying God. So here is the resolution that comes from that illumined mind of Ashwapati. He says that it is this tendency of the vital and mental to somehow emerge from the subconscious in the dreams and create this slippery path or this slippery terrain on which truth might stumble and fall. This is something that now I have to discover and exile. I have to discover it and take it by the horns, moral. So I have to discover it and then exile it. I have to banish it. The element in him betraying God. This is the element that still continues to betray God, and this is what I have to get rid of. So here is the Ashwapati making that resolution. When he realizes that not only humanity as a whole has a tendency to offer that resistance has not completely disappeared even from him, in spite of having reached the level of an illumined mind, and therefore, once he has identified the problem, he resolves that now it is this that I have to discover and exile.